What is software testing? Now, before talking about that, I want to give you a very painful story. I think it was a few years ago, 2 passenger airplane crashed. Passenger airplane. One Ryanair airline and one Ethiopian airline. In total, 359 people died. And both of the aircraft was from Boeing 737 MAX. Initially, Boeing blamed pilots and saying the reason this 2 airplane crashed because pilots were not experienced. But how likely 2 airplane crash in very short period of time and both of them have pilot error? It just doesn't make sense. And then what they did is, after the investigation, they found out that was not pilot's error. That was something called MCAS software that was hijacked the cockpit of those passenger airplane. So this is what happened. There's duopoly in the aviation industry. One, you have Boeing, another one, you have Airbus. So Airbus came up with this airplane called Airbus 320neo. One of the biggest advantage of this aircraft was that was 20% more fuel efficient. When we buy a car, we do that kind of things, right? Mileage per gallon, Toyota has really good mileage per gallon, where some US trucks, you can only go for 10 miles, for example, right? When the fuel cost is going up, it's very important for individuals and companies to make sure they get the maximum mileage for their gallon, for their fuel. Same thing, 20% saving from the fuel. Boeing for Airbus 320neo is a huge deal because 20% it may not look so significant if you're individual, but can you imagine if you're United Airline? Can you imagine if you're American Airline or Qatar Airline, all the biggest airlines in the world, and one of their biggest costs is fuel. If they have $1 billion fuel expenses a year, they're saving 20% saving is $200 million saving. And guess what? Fuel is not getting cheaper, it's getting more expensive. Now, in that case, lots of airline industry, companies like United Airlines, all other airlines, they were ordering lots of Airbus 320neo. Unfortunately, Boeing did not catch this wave. They caught off guard. They're like, oh my God, what we're going to do? So instead of building a new aircraft, because they don't want to lose market share from the Airbus, what they did is they used their existing body of their aircraft, Boeing 737. So they just call it MAX. That's it. So what they did is to increase the fuel efficiency, all they did is enlarge the engine from the both sides. Now you have bigger engine that is more powerful engine. Because it's more powerful, it's burning less fuel to do more work. Now you reach 20% fuel efficiency. Did they reach? Yeah, they achieved 20% fuel efficiency. However, because they caught off guard, they had to come up with 20% more fuel efficient airplane very fast. What they did, they actually worked around. They didn't solve the problem. They worked around. So they just used their existing body, aircraft body, without building a new one, and they just made a bigger, more powerful engine. Once they achieved 20% fuel efficiency, they found unintended consequences, which is negative effect. So when sometimes you get drug, let's say you get a medicine, sometimes it has side effect. For this thing, it was a side effect too. So because the engine of the airplane was too powerful, it was lifting the nose higher than it should be. The nose of the airplane was going up. So they're like, okay, how do we solve this problem? They're like, you know what? Why don't we just write a software? Okay, we're going to install sensor at the nose of their airplane. And if sensor detects the nose of the airplane is going higher, the MCAS software will automatically adjust it. In other words, MCAS software's job is identifying or detecting whether the nose is higher or not. If the nose is higher than usual or needed, its job is pushing the nose down a little bit. This is basically what happened. That's the job of the software. Now, in this 2 airplane, Ryanair and Ethiopian Airline, for some reason, that software didn't work properly. It hijacked the airplane, and for some reason, that MCAS software thought the nose were too high. So pushing down the nose. Now you're nose diving as an airplane. So the pilot is trying to pull up the airplane. However, the software, since it's hijacked the cockpit, is pushing down. Can you imagine when you're driving Tesla, autopilot, all of a sudden you lose control, whether somebody hacked it or autopilot didn't work out? Can you imagine on the highway you lost control and the Tesla is driving by itself and is speeding? That is like 1,000 times more scary than that because you're in the sky. So it's pushing down, the pilot is pulling up. And unfortunately, since the cockpit was hijacked by autopilot, which is MCAS, those pilots didn't make it. 359 people died because of MCAS software. And Boeing lost $50 billion in total. There's lots of lawsuit, and Boeing's reputation will never be the same. And unfortunately, those people will never come back. That's the consequences of if your software did not function properly. People can die, companies can go bankrupt, and people could go to jail. That is how important software testing is. Because you can only understand the software will function properly by testing it, by performing quality assurance process. Boeing could simply hire quality assurance engineers. Boeing could hire 10 software quality assurance engineers testing that software in their environment, and then to beta testing, maybe 1,000-hour flight testing. They could have solved this problem or avoid this problem. They didn't. They would rather lose $50 billion, kill 359 people, and have damaged their historical reputation. Boeing is a 100-year-old company. That is why software testing is extremely important. I want to remind you, can you imagine any hospital without software? We go to hospital, intensive care unit, the medicine, how much it's going to be. All this stuff is running upon software. The other day, CrowdStrike, global cybersecurity firm, they just published one update for old Windows-based systems. 4,000 airline got canceled because they couldn't process their payments or their ticket or boarding ticket, nothing. Half of the world stopped with the CrowdStrike. And you know what? One of the most important things, hospitals, they had to cancel all their procedures because now even hospitals cannot work. What if those people have critical conditions that you have to perform surgery? They couldn't do it. That is why software testing is one of the most important things this day to keep the world safer and better. Remember, your airplane, your train, your car, your phone, your bank, your hospital, everything you do is integrated with softwares. That's important to keep those softwares up to standard. We avoid situations like CrowdStrike blackout or Boeing 737 MAX crash. That is why software testing is extremely important.